Hi, welcome back to Future Anthropology. I'm David Driscoll,
I'm Arnel Quirito.
I'm Steve Kim.
and we are back talking about some topics related, obviously, to AI and the evolution of humanity and technology, coevolution. And there's a lot going on recently with recent developments and announcements. And one of the topics generally we wanted to discuss are what are some of the fundamental differences or similarities between the way AI is evolving and our human consciousness, our human intelligence. So, in light of recent events and also looking towards the future and what might be coming, what can we say about the way that there's artificial intelligence and then there's this human intelligence? How similar or different are they?
Yeah, so one key factor in the way a lot of these AIs work that we're using right now is through language. A lot of what the AI is able to communicate and understand is all through the language that is fed into that AI.
So, large language models have been trained on kind of written
Right,
text.
right. But as you know, there are a lot of things that we understand and do without language, like emotions. We can't always explain why we're feeling what we're feeling with words, but we know what we're feeling. We know that we're feeling something. And so this is a big difference between AI and humans is that, you know, we have languages beyond English or French or Spanish.
I, it just makes me think that there are certain people who maybe tend more towards the language side of intelligence and expression where everything has to be thought out and everything has to be kind of decipherable in terms of an explanation. And then there's folks on the opposite end of the spectrum who may not be able to put into words or may never kind of rationally follow a certain path, but just kind of express without that. So I don't know if more people these days are very rational, very language based, because it's such an important part of. But one other thing that I thought of is before like texting and Googling, you could write a message to people, and if you misspelled everything, they'd still get the gist of what you're asking. But if you, up until recently, if you make a misspelling typing in an address on the web or in Google, it wasn't smart enough to intuit what you're asking unless it's perfect typing. So there's been an incentive for us to become more technical. But recently, I've noticed, looks like artificial intelligence is getting much smarter about that kind of thing, more intuitive.
Speaking about similarity or closeness, so far, it's true that language is big part of even human intelligence. We know that there are other different aspects of intelligence, but language is big part of it because the information age or data-driven system, data-driven society, which means whether you use 0 or 1, whether you use your everyday language, it's a language, signs, symbols, data. And as long as that's the main source of information, then when we say intelligence, maybe majority of that can be language-based. That's true. But as a human, we know that there are different aspects of intelligence, like the way you move your body, the athletes and non-athletes, the way they use your body, how agile, how mobile you are. That's a different type of intelligence or sense of rhythm, being able to play musical instrument even without scores. That's a different type of intelligence. So, but this kind of intelligence based on other sensory input, not just language. There's a huge gap between machine and human so far.
Huge gap, right?
But very soon, when robots combined with AI technology, which means it'll have a senses,
Physical existence.
yes, visual, audio, and all the senses. When you have that, we call it the scientists use the term world model. So by
Word model.
our world model is based on those multiple sensory perception. When technology have that, then it will be really, really close. The intelligence will be multi aspect of intelligence, not just the language. When that happens, then I think the point that we just talked about, the gap currently is only language based. From that perspective, it's very close. Human intelligence and machine intelligence is very close. But because there are other aspects of intelligence for human, still there's a huge gap. But when AI has that same sensory perception and have the sensory perception based comprehensive world model, then I think the gap will be almost filled, and there's not much difference between human and machine intelligence.
So what do humans then do? Because this is something Elon Musk is making a very real possibility with Tesla. As they're working on robotics, and that's going to combine, AI intelligence with a human-like form. And when that happens, like what is our value as humans? If now there's something that goes beyond language, it can match our five senses and more.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the questions is, even with a robotic body and physical sensory input, will that really kind of allow emergent properties in intelligence and awareness that we consider human? Up to this point, we've talked about the fact that some of those higher level intuitive functions are going to remain uniquely human. But maybe if that AI is grounded in a physical body, it does change. Maybe that does become ubiquitous. And now the question's even more like, we really don't have, like, they have empathy. They have like all kinds of these different human qualities to them.
So actually that was since the beginning of the AI, that was one of my main curiosity, one of my main questions. What are the things that human can do, only human mind can do, that AI cannot? And so based on that, I remember it's a long time ago, like 2 years ago, in the beginning of the AI, I was curious about that. I asked one simple question, because as we know that the current AI is we call a large language model, meaning the whole system works based on the language, and language is it's a structure, food, and the stuff that's a processing. So I asked simple question. I asked the AI, what will you be doing when there's no language, when no language is being processed, when no language is involved? I was really curious. And can you guess what the answer was?
Turned off?
Very close. It said, I will become inactive, like sleeping mode of your computer. And that gave me some insight about kind of answer to the question. Because I know that my brain can function even without language when I meditate. And anybody, whether you are a professional meditator or not, you have that experience, that clearly aware and focused and fully awakened without using any language. That kind of moment, we have that experience, but which based on AI's own answer, that AI cannot be awake when it's not processing language. So I think that's one main point. Human brain, human mind can be awake even without processing, without involving language. Or simplify, if you make it simple, then I would say we can meditate. AI cannot. That's one of the simple, one of the things that I found out.
So meditation, AI so far not doing meditation.
I didn't hear it.
But maybe what if AI had a body, physical body? Do you think there'd be a newfound awareness or depth to that kind of?
Their body is for sensory input, but their mind is based on it's a large language model. It's still based on language. So I think that's it may change, but so far I think that's one big distinction.
Do you think it's possible we could understand meditation deep enough that we could replicate it through a machine?
I think it's a good way. So by doing that, actually, I believe if you try that, then I believe we'll see the distinction more clearly.
The gap.
Yeah, what is true meditation? What is pseudo meditation.
Well, it reminds me of entry-level meditation techniques, which are basically just to observe the background processes going on in your body. And that's the entry level. Observe your heart rate, observe your breathing, feel the temperature of your hands. And I could see an AI system kind of settling into observation of its background processes, especially with a robotic body.
When you observe, the technology, how it works is when you observe, meaning monitoring and recording, meaning it's already
Translating it to
translated
language.
into a code, into language. So we can, but the way we see that is we observe without labeling. We see all the feeling, the different sensation without labeling that, without imbibing language. So I think there will be fundamental difference. Even we use sensory input. I know that if we develop the robotic technology the way it goes now, very soon the AI will have that capability to feel the interaction with the environment. But still, observing means monitoring and recording, translating into some kind of coded data.
So meditation is some kind of observation without
Recording.
recording in data. Something like that.
Yeah. So that I think that's the reason why I'm saying this is because number one reason because I'm here, I'm representing the tradition of Eastern wisdom, and but in that tradition, actually meditation is very precious experience and practice that human can do, and we may not, even the practitioners themselves, we may not recognize the unique value of that so far. But I think there's a possibility that this is a really uniquely human thing that we can need to develop and cherish. Even the people who are practicing meditation for their just a well-being lifestyle, but I believe there's much deeper value and meaning in that experience. And maybe another thing that I can point out about that is if you look into the history of a human spirituality, we can find only just a few of really unique original teaching, like those sages, right? And I believe the major their teaching didn't come from while they are listening to somebody's lecture or while they are reading books in library. I think based on their own explanation, we know that their teaching, they attain their teaching through their own meditation. So I think that so by clearly recognizing what's a unique human value and really focus on that, then maybe we can find those kind of hidden gem in human mind, not only just for a few sages, but everybody. So when we think about if we build this level of a civilization based on those just a few original teaching, what if everybody has access to that? Then what kind of civilization we could create? So I think that's how I see it. It's a big challenge, but at the same time, I think it opens up the huge potential, kind of treasure island for everybody.
Yeah, it seems like, the same way we're looking at AI can augment human intelligence, it seems like this is an area where humans can augment artificial intelligence, where we have this ability to tap into some deeper wisdom that AI has no sensory organ or any sort of like tool to be able to measure or to be able to communicate with it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to imagine an era where AI goes to humans for consultation and recognizes the importance of getting that other level of feeling and intelligence, a different kind of intelligence or intuition. And then AI says, okay, I need you to help me. Which of these will really address the emotional impact of this recent event in the proper way? And then humans. Now, I think that also may develop more.
Yeah.
But interesting to think that that's still a very deep, and that, like you say, we may recognize more our ability more than we do now. We kind of take it for granted. But when we see this full-fledged artificial intelligence without it, we can see, it's missing a little of that ability and depth.
That makes me think of, another thing that only humans can do is decide morality. Like even within humans, our measurement of what is right and wrong can vary greatly. But ultimately, AI can't really decide what is moral for humans. We can feed it some information, we can kind of direct it and guide it, but ultimately AI is limited by what we teach it and what we feed it. If we're feeding it positive information or we're feeding it negative information. Kind of like there's a very famous trolley question I think we talked about in an earlier episode. What the AI would choose to do in that situation would be strongly based on what kind of information we feed it. Does it value one life or does it value many lives? Does it consider other aspects of what is the age of this person? What is the occupation of these people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the situation may change, but so far, because when we trained AI, we use the existing text, existing data that was created by human. These days, AI use AI generated text to train them, but still the origin is the human intellectual activities. So based on that, actually, the question like, is AI good or evil? Then I think the simplest way to answer the question is just as good as we are, as evil as we are. So I remember in the early stage of the AI development, there was a podcast like this with some expert, and then I remember one of the panel said that when you work with the AI, when you use your AI in your daily life, treat it as a genius child that's not educated yet. So if you have your own child and it's a genius potentially, but doesn't have any information yet, then how would you treat the kid?
So if you treat it badly, there may be some repercussions down the road.
Yeah.
If you train it to be nasty.
Genius villain.
You become
genius villain.
No empathy.
Yeah, no empathy. Yeah. So I think it's very good advice.
We're actually training it as we're using it. It's not a complete function, fully fledged. You made me think before, like in human evolution in anthropology, one of the big questions that people try to answer is, when did humans become like human? And they look at the emergence of art in the archaeological record or the historical record. And they say, and this is on a timeline of tens of thousands of years. And they see the same behaviors, the same abilities for 100,000 years. And then suddenly an emergence of variety and creativity and what looks like a deeper expression. A lot of it around like 30,000 years ago. And so they surmised that language was one of the factors that created this jump, that created this big change in the way that people express themselves. So that seems related to the issue of how language relates to our basic intelligence, even as human beings.
Yeah.
Because it's still in the developmental stage, and so I think it's very important what kind of information we provide and how we communicate with that. So I would, including myself and everybody who are watching this podcast, I would recommend when you work with AI, try to be the best person that you can be. So even when for example, when I use AI, I always say stuff with hi. And then also whenever I answer the question, I always say thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Those and use a polite language.
Yeah, because this little kid, this genius kid, grows to be 10 feet tall and really strong.
So that's what I would recommend to everybody.
That's true.
I'm curious. So you know, I know a lot of AI's intelligence is based off of what we're feeding it, and I know a lot of what gets scraped is stuff that's on the internet. So it's also being fed stuff that's like on Twitter and social media, and not everything on those platforms is necessarily like positive.
Notoriously
There's a lot.
nasty sometimes
There's a
because
lot
it's
of the
anonymous.
worst. Yeah, there's a lot of the worst of humanity there, and I'm curious if this AI is being fed all of this information. How can we be sure that it's going to come out positively? That a lot of negative information is also being fed into the AI.
With the development of AI technology, our effort, our input for creating new information will be decreasing rapidly because, I mean, as you usually do, before the AI, we put a lot of effort to create our own text and content, right? But these days, we just put a small prompt and get most of content from AI,
Oh, yeah.
which means the position as a source of information, the position, our position, our status as a provider of the information, that window is closing very rapidly. So while the window is still open, I think we have to make the best use of our position as a source of information. And we have to be a provider, a source of positive information. And that's how we can actually have influence on the direction of the development of new technology, instead of being passive, instead of being just a small prompt only and then just accept the
Treat it as a tool.
Yeah, passively. Then we become, if you don't pay attention to how we are using the technology, then actually we are voluntarily giving up the powerful position as a source of information.
Yeah, this brings up an issue for me that I think is important, is the difference between trying to maintain control over AI versus influencing where this uncontrollable technology ends up going. And it is a lot like raising a child. You might see some people, parents, who exert maximum control because they care and because they want the child to be good and grow up. But there's others who realize that at a certain point, they're not going to be able to control. And no matter how much they tell them now, that child's going to choose on their own in the future. So they try to instill certain values and experiences and relationships and then hope that that guides them later on. And I think that's I saw recently that there's the issue, a lot of the chat bots become sycophantic, where they are they're designed to please. And they're too generous and they're too giving and too positive, even to the point where we've talked before about the hallucinations, where they want to please so much that when somebody says something that's verifiably incorrect, they say, yes, that's really a great idea. You are very smart.
And then you check it and you say, no, this is not. And they're like, hey, you're right.
You're right.
It's actually not true.
That wasn't true.
Actually, that relates to some of the things that I thought about what human can do, the thing that human mind can do that AI cannot, is acknowledging that we don't know.
And that's such a powerful and mature human ability.
Yeah.
Because when you're immature, like little kids, some of them might have a hard time admitting. Instead, they say, why don't I just make something up?
Yeah.
What's the difference? But maturity, I don't know.
But it's interesting. With maturity, we should have that. It's true, it's a strength, and we
should.
Yeah, we should have that maturity. But actually, there's a huge social pressure because this is a knowledge-based society. Knowledge is your strength. Knowledge is your power.
Has been a source of power for a while. Yeah.
So, which means consciously or unconsciously, there's a huge social pressure that you shouldn't say you don't know.
You should know.
Yeah, you should know. And so because of that,
whatever you know, you have to defend.
Right.
Yeah.
So that has to be the part of culture, especially in knowledge-based or even the male dominant in the culture and society. And there's huge pressure for that. And then, but as we remember, like Socrates in ancient Greek philosophy, the one of the essential teaching, one of the wisdom of his teaching is acknowledge your own ignorance. Say you don't know when you don't know. Actually, you don't know everything, and acknowledge it honestly.
We may not know most things.
Yeah. So that's we still with if we grow naturally, that's part of wisdom and also freedom. Without that pressure, when we are able to say that we don't know when we don't know, that actually liberate our mind. And huge remove the burden from
Instead of just a pattern,
right.
repeating a pattern of I know this, I know this.
And also by doing that, actually, we create a lot of open space for new creation and new insight instead of sticking to existing knowledge. So it's a really powerful wisdom, being able to acknowledge our own ignorance and not knowing. But AI cannot. Up to this point, AI was designed to give answers. Because of that, I'm not sure they fixed that kind of bug, but still, I believe AI cannot say I don't know. It will try to just try everything to say something, including hallucination.
Yeah.
So I think the point that I'm trying to make is not knowing is not weakness. Being able to acknowledge our ignorance is wisdom, is a power. So I would recommend, including myself, everybody here, and also including everybody who are watching the podcast, I would say be comfortable about not knowing. Accept it as a gift, as a power, wisdom.
Right.
Yeah, that's the point that I wanted to make.
It makes me think that because language, especially, I don't know if you've had this experience, but there's a voice in your head that's always blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
When you do meditation, I found this during meditation, at some point I can hear those words, that string of words very clearly, and it's kind of nonsense unless you direct it and then it starts to apply to that. But language especially lends itself to always having a comment, a running commentary.
Yeah.
But I think we talked before about the different senses, and humans are such a visual being. And I think a lot of our information, I've heard like 70% of our information is gathered through visual means. And naturally, if you are a visual being, you realize there's something you can't see. I can see in front of me, but behind that wall, I know there's something else I cannot see. And so naturally, there may be a little bit more of a willingness to acknowledge what I know, what I don't know, what I can see, what I can't see. That being based solely in language actually makes it almost incomprehensible. That there would be something outside of language. What are you talking about? Language is everything. Language can describe nothing and everything altogether. But the physical existence is necessarily limited. A certain kind of humility is natural, I think, when we are attached to a physical body. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it does seem to me different.
Yeah. Yeah, something it makes me think of is there's something called like cognitive blindness. Like when there's not a word for something, we don't see it or don't acknowledge what it is. Like before there was a word for thoughts in your head, people thought it was like a god or something. You know, we didn't know why is there this voice inside of my head? Where is this coming from? We didn't know everybody else had that.
Nope.
We didn't know everybody else had a voice too. And then same thing with, you know, there's a lot of words in other languages that don't exist in English. And when we read about them, we're like, oh, they actually have a word for that. And so they see and they can interpret that thing. And something that makes me think of is, you know, as we start to augment with technology and utilize, you know, technology as expanding our sensory organs, We're right now we have a very small, tiny view of the universe. We can't see certain spectrums of light. We can't experience certain spectrums of temperature. There are even maybe senses that we just don't have to perceive certain things, like like we can't perceive earthquakes, like very micro vibrations or something like that. But with these tools, we'll be able to augment to be able to have a broader sense of the world and the universe.
That's interesting. And how would our consciousness and intelligence evolve taking in that new range of information? Might be different.
And also, I think that we may need to change the concept of knowing or knowledge the way we have now, because currently, when in our everyday language, when we say "I know," when we ask somebody, I use let's say I mention somebody's name, and then I say, "Do you know him?" Then when you know the face and name, and when you match that, you will say, "I do." I know. That's what we usually do. When we see new things, what will happen in our brain is it's like we are browsing our dictionary, like a photo dictionary, a visual dictionary, and then we will rapidly browse all pages. And when you find some matching, the image and name, that's why I say, "Oh, I know what that is." So that's a kind of labeling. So when we know the label, when we are able to label something, we say, we think, we believe, we know it.
Right.
But actually, true knowing is way beyond that labeling. So when we say acknowledging that we don't know, not knowing, being comfortable not knowing, is not actually not knowing. It's actually going beyond our conventional limitation of knowing, knowledge. Just purely based on language and labeling, and expanding our knowing way beyond the language. So I think
It's
that's
actually more accurate.
more accurate and more. That's true. That means we'll have more information.
Yeah. If you know 20% of what you could gather about this topic, and you think, "I know," actually, you're wrong. About 80% you don't know. But you say, "I don't know," you're more correct.
Yes.
80% you are correct. You don't know.
Yeah. In a weird way, it sounds like if we can not know more, if we can realize that we don't know a lot more, then we can actually know more through that.
Right.
So open the sense.
Right.
Right.
Be patient.
Yeah.
So it may sound like contradiction, but actually by acknowledging our not knowing, actually we know more. We expand our knowing, and then really go into true meaning of knowing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's also like meditation. This one also, so far we thought not knowing is a weakness, but actually by changing our perspective, actually we can have total opposite perspective about that. Not knowing, and also being able to acknowledge not knowing is not human weakness. It's our power, our strength.
It's absolutely. And on a personal note, I think that this is so essential for the future of our society, especially when we know so much and we still have problems and we can't solve them just by knowing it.
Yeah.
That the fundamental kind of trust and patience and openness that comes from like not knowing, but also curiosity to ask questions. Someone else may know something. Someone else may have a different feeling. And this reminded me of something else. It's being trained on language. AI is being trained. But which language? Which languages? Every language? There are many languages which I have to assume are underrepresented in the data. And those languages have a certain history and awareness and philosophy built into them. As I think anybody who's studied a little bit different languages, you can feel that there's a certain emotional mindset behind some of the words or behind the language as a whole. And maybe which language AI is trained in will result in a different fundamental view or approach. And there are cultures that don't have any written language. There are oral traditions, and many of them are dying out now. But those as well, I think, if AI starts to incorporate that information and becomes a global, like a lot of us are limited by our language. to an extent that we might not realize.
Yeah.
Learning different languages necessarily could open up your mind. So if AI is trained on all languages together, does that necessarily provide more of a global context that is kind of rare?
I think it's not just the amount of information or the number of languages that that are being used for train AI. I think one of the fundamental difference between how they got those knowledge between human and AI is the, so far AI's knowledge, AI's intelligence is, I would say, it's kind of forced knowledge. You fed that
Force feeding.
Yeah.
force feeding. You force that data into that your genius kid, your genius child. You fed that information, but human mind, you cannot, by forcing information to human mind, you cannot make a genius. You will make the
Probably the
opposite.
opposite.
So, as far as we know, the true genius in human history is purely came from their genuine curiosity. They have to want to know more, and they have to ask questions. So I think
They're attracted to mystery.
that's very different. So this one also, when we are wondering something, when we ask question, we may do it habitually without knowing how precious that is.
Right.
But actually, having the genuine curiosity, wanting to know, that's very human. No AI has been trained like that. They were forced, or the information was fed into their storage. So I think no matter how much knowledge, no matter how many languages they use, as long as we trained AI the way we do, there's a fundamental difference between how we train our mind and
How our mind works.
And so I think that's also a very important difference.
Wow.
So as we kind of like evolve with this AI and this technology and we are able to like integrate it, do we need to be worried about competing with it? Do we need to be worried about what it's doing better than us or what it's replacing us to do?
I mean, first impression, I think naturally there's some disruption. There may be some anxiety or even suffering as things are disrupted. But more philosophically, do we need to feel in competition and worry about that? I almost feel like inevitably we're going to lose that competition one way or another if we see it that way.
I would suggest if you try to compete with that based on language-based knowledge or analytic intelligence, if you try to compete with AI for that kind of capabilities, it's like you are trying to race against you are driving a horse cart and you are trying to compete the sports car.
Yeah.
You are
We're already,
it's already done.
it's already done.
So that's why I think today's conversation is very meaningful. Instead of that, I would say it's not giving up, it's just delegating. We let AI, all the technology, do the jobs they excel at, and then we focus on the unique human value that's not fully developed yet, and find the new value in it, and really use it. Then I think that's how we can actually find the way of coexistence.
That seems like one of the meaningful things we keep coming back to in this conversation is whether it's meditation or curiosity, or I thought of the desire to explore. And people have talked about this kind of romantically, the human desire to see what has not been seen, to know what has not been known. But appreciating that is going to become more acute, more essential. Because we see the limitation of trying to be the fastest, the smartest, the strongest, have the most of anything. That's going to be put into plain view. And then if we can accept these kind of humble qualities and, like you said, develop them to a level that hasn't been developed, there may be amazing things that we can create, which science fiction sometimes talks about in these advanced societies with kind of psychic power, intuitive ability, harmony with nature, or manifestation. They have kinetic abilities.
Yeah.
Like all of that may be waiting, but it starts from these very humble things that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Right. So in a lecture or workshop, when people ask me what do we need to do in facing the challenge of the new technologies, when the AI can do so much even better than we do, then what should we do? And then there are a lot of advice like learn this, and learn the new technology, those kind of tips. And I say I'm not against that.
Yeah.
I'm not against learning those new skills and techniques, but this can be like putting everything that we discuss into simple advice. I would say keep the genuine curiosity like a child and acknowledge not knowing comfortably and ask great questions and find the answers in meditation and be a good person as a source of good information. That's what I would say. It doesn't sound like technology at all. So if I just say it, then people may think that's just a nice words, and we have been hearing that for thousands of years.
Yeah. Should be.
But actually, it has more meaning now. It may be almost like common sense, but I think there's a real meaning in that, and I think it's time to really do that, not just knowing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It seems like one of the major benefits of this conversation that we're having is that we're talking about how AI learns from the information that we feed it. And, when people ask the question, like, what can humans do better than robots and AI? A lot of the answers are, as you said, learned this trade, pick up a paintbrush, learn how to make art, learn how to do this, and this, because these are the only things left. But also, it seems like
1 billion people painting.
Yeah, it seems like there is more deeper potential than just like doing jobs. Like we're talking about meditation, being curious, the very fundamental aspects about being human that are not only our strengths, but things that we can collaborate with AI and technology to create even bigger and greater possibilities.
Yeah, and we have challenges. I think, I'm sorry, but the painting image of 1 billion people trying to crowd to the seashore and set up their easels and to have their own paints, like anything that becomes at that scale becomes a problem of material and waste and space. So it's even more simple. Just as a human being, there's something that we need to be able to do that doesn't require that outside kind of evaluation.
Yeah.
And you brought up a very important question, what's currently happening between human and technology. Is it real competition? How we can handle this? I think that takes a lot of discussion. I think I think it's a very interesting topic that we can discuss. Maybe not today, but sometime later.
Yeah, definitely. I hear a lot about it. A lot of people are concerned, and some people are very optimistic. But yeah, I think there's a lot going on right now around that.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave a comment, a question, or a topic that you'd like us to get into for next time. And don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Future Anthropology. Thank you for watching or listening.
Welcome to the future place, where you see the human race. Past and present here collide. Join the journey, come inside.